Good morning. Yes, welcome to November, right? People of color representing with that essence of a difference, representing with uniqueness in season, representing with understanding and with realizing our challenges were there, but our opportunities to be the stronger us is in the room in season. It is not that we were challenged with during our season that has us be where we are at in our season and at the year November 2022 with our representing people of color talk, but it is that attitude, that quality, that stronger you that when we started the journey with representing people of color in 2021, our motivation in 2021 is that no matter if your light is off today and no matter if your camera is giving problems in season, but the opportunity for you to appear and for people to listen in, even if they don't look at the video on that day, but listening to the encouraging word, if they put the earphones on and they listen to the sound in season, it is that opportunity that when I was in South Africa, I have written a song that says, let your light shine on that day. Let your voice be heard. Let it be declared that our King, amen, the universal strength of our Creator lives and reigns with everything that we do and concerning everything that we do. That's the motivation for today. Yes, my hairstyle today. I love my hairstyle. The light doesn't want to be right, but we are there. We are appearing in the currentness of our seasons. And with representing people of color today, I want to focus on a few things. One of the most important is the mental state of our generation during this season, right? Our generation have been mentally challenged a lot and they went through a lot. And only therefore we do not disregard when we advocate, when we speak about what we are required to speak about, then we do not disregard the challenges that we went through. We do not disregard where our generation came from. We do not disregard the state of our generation currently, because remember, we all find ourselves today in different households, in different countries, in different communities, in different religious groups, different traditions, different upbringings, different ways of upbringing, but we are all representing people of color today. We are all representing that opportunity to be a difference today, a difference with where we are at, a difference with what it is that we do, a difference with how it is that we react, with where we find ourselves at in life, a difference with what it is that you can do with where you are, right? Because I always have mentioned during this month, I don't have finances in my account, but what I do have is that opportunity to be a difference with what I can say. And what I can say might just reach someone else in another country, right? I might be able to educate someone that tunes into my video that says, wow, these words spoken to me. These words have spoken to me, and they go and react not on anything, but on the voice of the universe itself that speaks to every one of us where we are at in our seasons. With saying that, I want to start today on our, and I want to discuss today three important things, right? Three important aspects, right? I want to recap on the challenges that we had ever since 2020, yes. Ever since the COVID-19 virus started, right? I want to recap on what is it that we went through. It's always good for us to allow ourselves to talk about what did we went through. Because remember, after the COVID-19 season was over, everyone was required to go back into the offices and no one was nurtured into the mental effect that it had on the people that now has to sit in the office, that now has to realize that this happened in the world. We don't know where it started. We don't know how it started, but the requirement is that we are fine with where we are at in life. Because remember, there's bills that needs to be paid, there's houses that needs to be paid, there's cars that needs to be paid, there's daily ways that we need to make it work for us. One thing that we have forgotten is that when we allow our season, when we recap our challenges, we focus on our ways of leadership during this season, right? So we recap what we went through. We focus on the requirement that we have today, that leadership needs to abide to what is necessary in our countries, so that when we have things like viruses, when we have things like tsunamis, right, we always have mentioned that it is important that we have a responsive approach to that we respond without having to respond before the things happens, so that when these things ever happen again, then we don't find ourselves so mentally challenged by what happened, but then we prepare ourselves. There's always ways that we can prepare for things like tsunamis, like earthquakes, and the COVID-19 is the same method of a tsunami, right? That struck. The preparation, the preparedness plan that needs to be in place, so that when things like this happen, our first instance is we go over the instances of legislatively, what is it that we need to implement, the policies in our countries that now needs to stipulate our every reaction, that these things doesn't have that same effect that it had in 2020, because the COVID virus in 2020 was really shaking this whole world, right? And when we are mentally challenged by that again, and leaders now knows the reaction, then you don't go and do something else. No, you follow the same approach and you implement even something new in that different approach, so that that effect is not so bad on us. You immediately respond with urgency. You don't tell yourself that economically we're going to be in a financial state. No, because there's lots of agriculture to make it work. There's lots of donations. There's lots of food stores in every country has got the food stores, have got the countdowns, the food towns, the Shoprite, the Checkers, and all those countries has got food that they distract on a daily basis, that they throw away on a daily basis, has got vegetables that are fine, right? So there's ways that we can make it work, and these shops needs to be in this mentally preparedness plan for when our countries are struck with challenges like this again, then our preparedness plan has got that bit of a way that our shops now make way for responses when our country goes through challenges like COVID-19, goes through challenges that has hit the country like wars, like when people wants to take over your country. Those preparedness plans needs to be updated. It needs to be rechecked quarterly. The audits that we do in our countries is not audits that internationally now. We went through this COVID season and now we forgot what happened. No, the auditors now every year needs to do regular audit checks to ensure that when things like this happens, it's not going to have that effect on our countries again. So those audits, those health and safety teams, those teams that leads the human rights, yes, of our nations, the parliamentary leaders needs to now sit and they need to draw up a plan to prepare and to help our countries prevent to mentally go through this challenge again. So it is not that you financially need the money to now work through it. No, it is that we now need to focus on how do we respond when things like this happen again? What do we now to yearly do? We do our quarterly audit. You do your yearly once a year audit. You do your audit 3 times a year. That your internal people in your country now goes to prepare and now goes to check on the responses in the hospitals, the responses in your communities, the responses in your regions, the responses when it goes to the shops that needs to fund food to the countries, right? So that whole process is one process that includes everything, but the government leaders needs to lead that process with effectiveness, so that when that happens again, then the shops knows, okay, every shop in the region now needs to make sure that the elderly people are being fed once a week or once a month with veggies that now comes from the farms. And the whole process is a whole sustainability process that now prepares us for tsunamis, that now prepares us for challenges like COVID-19. So it is the challenge happened. The challenge made us react in a chaotic way. The challenge that happened with the COVID-19 revealed to us a lot in our countries, a lot of things that we can work on, a lot of things that we need to get right, a lot of financial things, a lot of things when it comes to the television programs, when it comes to the education, the social, South Africa has got social workers, right? But they've got social services in communities. But the social services in the communities, they are only focusing on a certain aspect of social services, right? So the communities in general are not that part of the social development in our communities in South Africa. The social development in South Africa are mostly focused on the children in the community, are mostly focused on when people knock on the office door and come and complain, right? But the social services needs to have that effect, that your social services, people don't need to come and knock on your door to tell you about the challenges. No, I went to England and Antoinette them work like this. Antoinette is a social worker in England, right? And they have a team of social workers for every region in the country, right? So they specifically work on every level. They work on schools. They have a project and they work constantly on that project in the community. So the project is a database of the children. So you have your educative social workers, right? And those educative social workers do not sit in their offices. No, Antoinette has to get onto the train and she needs to drive to a community. She needs to knock on the people's doors. She needs to say that you are on my list of social services and I need to check your household circumstances. I need to check that your food is on your table. I need to check. We don't need the NGOs that are all over the place. If the country's leaders does not know how to make work of the NGOs, then the government needs to take lead of this. Because remember, the NGOs works a bit here in this community and that community doesn't have food on the table. And that person in South Africa earns 50,000 and that person in South Africa doesn't have food in their bank. That doesn't have food in their cupboard, right? So this system is a governmental way of leadership that we require in our countries. We don't need our countries to be all over the place. We don't need our presidential leaders to be all over the place. We need people who can work together, not only when the municipality calls a meeting and when they decide they have money this month and they call a meeting and then they want to speak with everyone because now they've got food on the table. No, it does not work like that, because we need to make work of that we can do. There's a lot of things in our communities that we can do, in our countries that we can make work with. And the challenges that opened our eyes in 2020 is that made us the stronger, better us in 2022, that while we are sitting at November 2022 this year, we decided 2023, we do not know the ways of leadership when it comes to United Nations meetings. We do not know what they are discussing concerning our countries. But what we can do is, while we have our presidential leaders in our country, our presidential leaders needs to have an open mindset concerning the country in general. Yes, they are being restricted a lot by the United Nations requirements to want to implement this and to want to lead this in the country and to want to manage the country in this way. But our requirement in our house is the in-house requirement that we need our presidential leaders to make work to say that these NGOs now becomes part of our parliamentary meetings, right? We need them in-house. We can't have them out-house, because then they're going to work all over the place, and then we're going to again have issues where there's regions of people that does not have food and other people that earns 50,000 rand a month. We need to balance that. We need to get it right. We need to figure out what it is that we have to do in order to make sure that not logically can someone have a house, they have a car, they go to Checkers on a monthly basis, they go and buy food of 5,000 rand, they go and have 2 trolleys of food or 3 trolleys of food, and half of South Africa doesn't have food on their table. Logically, financially, how is it that we lead our countries? We need to get these finances right. No, we do not need Rishi Sunak to come and do it in our countries. No, Europe, you do not need Rishi Sunak to work these things out for you. You need to find European people. Yes, we need to find in-house people that understands this is where Europe is at when it comes to war. This is where South Africa is at when it comes to poverty. This is where Africa is at when it comes to what is happening with the abuses and the mental state of Africa, of what Africa went through. Not only because of today, Africa has mentally challenges of how the world treated them for many years, and those mental challenges are requiring them to react in such a way that they do not care how they treat their people in-house, right? That they do not care what it is that they do in-house, right? So the mental state of Africa is something that we're going to have to gradually work with on our own pace, with understanding. This is the challenges that our country went through. This is what Africa in general went through. Africa in general are still recapping, they are still remembering all the pain that people put them through, and now they are abusing their people in their countries because your people moved to Europe and your people went to marry a person who now has put our family through abuses. So it is those mental challenges that they still are trying to overcome, right? And the elderly people in country are angry because the African children moved out and they went to go and marry people who is now the people, according to them, that has abused the houses, right? And now they go and abuse families in Africa. And only because of that, we need to work and the level of what is the challenge of our people, what is the challenge of our nations. That is our priority when we work, when we approach leadership in 2023. You do not tell me that your challenge is poverty only. It is not only poverty. Every country also only focus on the finances. That is why I got angry when they told me Rishi Sunak, the finance or whatever of Europe, right, is the prime minister. But I said, what is he gonna do? Because Europe has got wars every generation. How is Rishi Sunak gonna have an impact on the wars that are happening? Because you are telling me that he's the financial of that finances and of that finances and of that finances. But it is not only finances. Europe is a generation that went through mental challenges because of wars, and they need the hospitals to be on board with where they are at. They don't need to lose face. Remember when I was in Europe in 2017, I visited. I'm planning to fly to Europe very soon again. Yes, thank you for that. But I went to in 2017, I went to the workplace where Antoinette was working, right? And to the hospital, right? And I was sitting like an employee, and they treated me like an employee, and I was sitting in the cafeteria, right? And it looked like a mall. They're trying to make it home for everyone. But the mental state of the Europeans are part of the wars that they have gone through, right? And it is not only that they require the leadership to focus only on leading their finances. No, yes, finances is a very big part of it, but the requirement of understanding that Europe had a war every generation. What is the reason of the war? How is it that we can prevent this from happening? Where is it that we need to focus on? What is our responsive plan when things like that happens in our meetings, in our G7 meetings, right? Then we don't need a financial advisor to come and advise us on finances. No, we need a leader that can advise us on how do we prevent this war from happening. There's negotiations that needs to happen around those tables, that people that understand one another's languages, that understand that this is the European nation. This is a battle that is now not only a financial battle, but this is between different European countries, right? We focus on the Brexit, right? And the exit. What does Brexit means to Europe? What did the exit in Brexit means to Europe? Why did we have to exclude ourselves from the next European country, right? Why did we have to abide by this and this? So when these meetings in the G7 meetings, whatever the G7 meetings is, I don't even yet know what they discuss in these meetings, but I continuously mention it because I think it is a valid point in where we will find ourselves at with why there's so much war every generation. And then when the Europeans has got their approach to be able to sit around one table, to be able to work through those differences without having to understand the economy, but understanding the mental challenges. When the economical problems have a mental effect on our people, it is now not only that there's not bread on the table, but it is that when we hear this war that's gonna start, then we get paranoia, then we get nervous because we know what Europe went through, and then everyone wants to react according to what is required so that the agreement is on the table and so that there's no more disagreements when we have to deal with situations like decisions like exiting one country and learning that Europe is one family, it is one house with different families in, and one house had to have one understanding. They have to speak the same language. They have to understand what is the battle that we came from. They have to have leaders that understand where are we leading Europe to when it comes to 10 years from today. What is our vision? How do we perceive Europe in general? Is it only to us about the sustaining the households, or what is our approach when it comes to protecting our people in our countries? Because remember, the COVID virus has opened a lot of our eyes concerning the choices and the decisions and what is important to us and what is not important to us. So the one thing that paranoids European people is the state of war that reveals to them what is important to our leaders and what is not important to our leaders. Humanity is important. Is food in our tummies important? Yes, but priority to me is the safety of your people in your country. So what is it that Europe requires them to deal with? There's lots of gangsterisms in Europe that comes from different countries of people that now finds themselves in the European, on the borders, on the soils of Europe, because Europe makes home for everyone. But all of these differences are things that people need to work on, and they are getting education on, and the education starts on the television screens. How do we educate when these people sit and they watch in and out television screens? What is the television programs that we have to put on to include everyone? Because now our house became a house of the international global nation, and everyone now wants to move to Europe because Europe is now the next best thing. But when Europe is the next best thing, then the protective environment needs to be that when people of outside countries enter our house, when they need to know the respect and appreciation required on our borders when they enter our house. That is of utmost importance, so that when these children grow up, no matter the angers of years ago, no matter the apartheid challenges of years ago, but then they learn that then they switch the television program on, and they learn that these European people, they appreciate us as people in general. They show us appreciation. They open their doors for us. They make us feel welcome in their countries. So no, they do not hate on us. Maybe it's another battle that's happening. Maybe apartheid is something else. Because people of color, when we switch the television on, then people of color is the Europe that opened the doors to everyone. And therefore, when African people and other nationality people find themselves in Europe, it is not that your family was born there. No, it is that the fact that Europe remains Europe, and that your family came into Europe for somewhat reason, but Europe is showing appreciation to you by looking after you, by making sure that you are well fed, by making sure that your mama have a job, by making sure that Africa is fine, by making sure that the African people in Europe are fine, by giving them all that they require, so that we do not plan against them, and we do not go and abuse them, and we do not still fight apartheid battles, and we do not go and stop Putin and Ukraine wars. No, because Europe cares for us the way that humanity are required to care for one another. And that is the way that when we look at people of color next year, we want to see this color of a difference everywhere. When I switch television on, New Zealand knows that I want to see that happening on New Zealand television. This Rubia is very arrogant about it, and New Zealand gets very angry, but New Zealand has learned to know to take a step back, and Rubia has learned to know to take a step back when we have to. Why? Because we have learned to know that there's going to be anger in the room, that there's going to be lots of emotions in the room, but the one opportunity we have in this life is to appreciate everything concerning all the colors in the universe. Rubia always says people of color is not people of color like this color. People of color is white, black, green, blue, pink, yellow, orange, all the colors. That is the stunning colors of the universe. That is every nation, every nationality. No, India, Rubia does not have a problem with India, because Priya is from India, and Priya is the most stunning Rubia. She's very stunning, and she's just like Rubia's mother. She's got that Mama Anna factor. And yes, so Rubia appreciates India, but Rubia has to educate what is required in season. And so that when there's people, we have mentioned before that when our generation is in blindness and someone looks in and they look at it in a different way, and their different eyes then makes them knowing and makes it visible that there is a situation that we can actually educate one another right from wrong. That is our approach, just basically when it comes to the challenges. And when recap on those challenges, that is the basic factors of things that we can do and the challenges that we had. But the stronger us is our response that comes along with all of the challenges that we went through. It is that responsiveness that when we realize that this is the challenges that happened around us, it is how are we going to respond to prevent those challenges from having that mental effect on our people. Because I want to focus on the approach that our leaders would have so that we mentally overcome all of these challenges. Our approach includes everything in our communities. So one thing that I require our leaders to work on next year is when our leaders have their leadership meetings and they discuss things like storms, tsunamis, poverty, COVID-19 now becomes that, right? That is the responsive plan, health and safety responsive plan of countries, right? When it comes to poverty, it's all in one group, right? It's poverty, It's COVID-19. It is storms and tsunamis. So that response is the same response required, right? You only need one policy or procedure that you need to, every time that happens in your country, the responsive way is gonna have, it's gonna be the same way of responding to that is required in season. And that method, that way, that pace of responding is that protective environment that humanity requires when we look at our leaders. So why did we get angry with leaders this year? Is because when leaders respond in a way that is excluding humanity, right? Because remember, we were educating about mental impairment people and how we have not included them into our generation. The requirement of having to educate on our television. Thank you, Al Jazeera and New Zealand, for bringing that in this year again. We need to continuously abide to that policy of inclusion, right? That policy of not excluding, because remember, everyone was in the room, but the mental impairment people was not in our rooms. They were not on our televisions. They were not in our offices. Some offices have recruited one mental impairment person, one person in a wheelchair, one person that is blind, but they have not done everything, because there's lots of things that the generation has been educated on. What can the blind people in the office do? They can do typing, they can do a lot of things, right? What can the people do that is not blind, but that sits in a wheelchair? Maybe one arm cannot work, but the one arm can write, right? They can write policies and procedures, right? They can help us with ideas and bringing ideas forth. And we need to include them into our generation, right? We need to have that one mindset that in the season, the one response that humanity had that brought us, our generation, to division is that everyone was not in the room, that the leaders led us in such a way that was not protective to everyone, right? Because what we noticed on television is what happened around us. When the mental impairment people were not on television, the mental impairment people were not in the offices also. They were scared sometimes to go to the shop because people would look at them in a different way. They would sometimes sit in the houses because people would look at them in a different way. And only because of that, 2023, we need to make a bit more work of inclusion, right? Our offices needs to be a bit more firmer on including people with impairment. We started this year with that. We didn't have the completeness of the year with the education of what we need leaders to do, that approach that we want leaders to have, that when it comes to your recruitment, when it comes to those legislative policies, when it comes to the human right protective plan of every country needs to have a human right protective plan, right? We don't know if countries has got that yet. We need a human rights protective plan. That comes part of our responsive approach when we deal with challenges in our countries. The human protective plan makes, I know there's a human rights, whatever we have been educated in college, right? When I went to college, when I studied human resources, we studied it, but it was not implemented. We need that human rights protective plan. It needs to be a drafted plan that every organization abides by. And the plan needs to be a bit more clearer. The plan does not stipulate 10% of your people needs to be disabled, and then they go and they do audits and there's no disabled people in the offices. There's no disabled people in the workplaces. There's no disabled people on the television. They are all sitting in the houses. South Africa is trying to make it work for them because South Africa has got offices that is now excluded from everyday people, and now they go and sit there and the South African people sits here. And the South African people, when they step out, abuses them because they only sit there and the South African people works in these offices. We don't need that. We need oneness of our generation. Yes, it's gonna take time. Yes, it takes lots of education, but we can protect everyone while we educate and while we do that right. We need that percentage in the offices of every country. We need that percentage on the television screen. We need 10% of black people on our television screens. If your country legislatively, if your country has got so many black people, then so many percentage of people in your country that is non-white needs to be on your television. Why? So that there's no wars, so that there's no gangsterism, so that there's no abuses in the community, so that there's no challenges that people want to take over your country. If there's so many Indians in your country, then we need a 1% of that Indian on your television channel. Your television channel plays 24 hours a day, and so many percentage plays during the day, and so many percentage need to be on television during the night time. And so many percentage of your people, disabled people, we need in your television screen by the day, right? So many percentage needs to represent, and so many percentage of black people is in your country, representation. So many people of that people, we need a representation. 1% of that, we need a representation, including everyone that is now that the right, human right, the protective right, so that no country goes and sit on the television screen and they go and abuse the next country, so that no country go and start a war because they're angry by what's on the television, so that no young boy goes and get a gun out of his pocket because he was challenged on television and now he runs into the shop and he shoots everyone because of what happens on the television. He can't tell everyone what he sees on television is abusing him. No, because these guys does not talk about the pain that they feel when they look on the television and when they realize that they are still being excluded during the season. And then they don't go and talk because no one even comes and find out from them how they are doing. Everyone just tells them that they are gangsters and that they are doing this wrong and that they are doing this wrong. No one comes to tell them, my gangster boy, is it that you require some bread on your table? Our government needs to work with groups that are part of the parliamentary yearly plans that focuses on these gangsterism issues, that sits in the offices, that says Rabia has educated us on people of color, that the government needs to make sure that our gangsterism become part. The gangsterism issues and the human right protective plan requires the government to make sure that there's gangsterism leaders that sits in on your parliamentary meetings, so that there's no chaoticness in your countries, so that when these gangsters have issues, they are being educated in parliament. This is the way that our country works, and this is the challenges that the country has. This is the food that's not on the table, but this is how we can provide food for even the gangsters on the streets, right? Because even the gangsters on the streets are part of humanity. They are human beings and they are part of humanity. You do not exclude them. You do not start hanging them. You allow them to be fed around the table in your parliamentary meetings. You include them. You educate them on why you decide this, why you decide that, if they don't have a job, how many of them need a job? Who can employ them? There's lots of farms that they can work on. But when their leaders enters the parliamentary meetings, then their leaders is going to go with a different mindset. Then they're going to go with a protective mindset. And then our communities are going to be better, and we're going to feel better, and everyone's reaction are going to be better when we move forward. That is a state of overcoming the poverty and the pace of that we sometimes in life set things aside and we tell ourselves, no, we're gonna worry about the gangsterism issues. No, that's the minister of police's work to work with the gangsters. No, it's that minister's work to work with the gangsters. And the more we push it aside is the more we allow problems to come in. The more people knock on your door and they say, but I want to talk to you about this, and you push them aside, you make way for other problems to come in. You push people aside and then you make way for other problems to come in. And only therefore we require our leaders to lead us with our human rights protective plan that needs to be addressed. It needs to be revisited. It needs to be redrawn in order to make sure that we know that there's so many people in our countries that are disabled, so many percentage are unemployed, so many percentage are in gangsterism, so many percentage are unemployed on school under the age of this 7 years old. We do not do the statistics so that we can only pay people 50,000 rand and give half of the other food to no one, and other people don't have food, right? We do these statistics so that we can find a way to make it work in our countries for everyone. So all of those statistics, if you have the right people that does the statistics properly, if you have the right presidential parliamentary leaders and parliamentary members that goes into the community, not to go and play games, not to go and steal money again, no, not to go and only feed for those who already earn 50,000 rand, because you get people in the parliamentary lead meetings who even earns 50,000 rand and then they still complain about having another 50,000 rand on their table. And then there's half of the country that doesn't have food. And only because of that, we need a percentage of everyone on our draft, our analysis, yes, in order to make sure that our human rights protective plan includes everyone in our country. And when we sit on a monthly basis to work out what's required in our countries, and when we respond on a monthly basis to those requirements, we respond effectively with understanding that yes, so many thousands are unemployed, so many thousand are in different provinces in the country, and while they're in different provinces, they have these different leaders, and these different leaders works with different shops like ShopRite in the country, like Checkers in the country, and Checkers now make sure that each parliamentary leader has got a house, yes, and the house now works with Checkers and with ShopRite in the country to now make sure that the veggies and the things that now goes to ShopRite and Checkers, that is a bit too much, right? Then they go and provide to those people in the community. And then it's not all over the place. It happens from the parliamentary minister, and the parliamentary minister speaks to the parliamentary member, and the parliamentary member sits with ShopRite and Checkers and Woolworths and Food Town and Countdown and all the shops, and they sit around the table, because while we are working the finances out, we make sure that there's veggies on your table, we make sure that there's food on your table, we make sure that the food doesn't go to Auntie that, and Auntie that doesn't give food to that person because they don't like that person. No, we make sure that those parliamentary leaders, those parliamentary members works with ShopRite and Checkers. There's a house in every community that is the receiver house for ShopRite and Checkers according to the government, not according to the NGO, because the NGO is angry with the next auntie next door. We don't need the NGO, we need the government's house. And the government house is where ShopRite and Checkers delivers for every community according to the requirement. Because you can give me a farm and I can't even feed the people because they need to pay when they come and buy the veggies on the farm. So ShopRite and Checkers needs to give people without having to pay. The poverty people, the poverty communities, they need to make sure that every region has a house of government. And the house of government is where ShopRite, Checkers, Woolworths, Food Town goes and deliver the house's food, and the house's food are then being delivered to every person in the community, to the elderly people who doesn't have food on that day, because the government funds only keeps them 2 weeks. Then the electricity bill goes up, and then the house must be paid, and then the rent must be paid. And then there's no food on the table anymore because they must even still go and buy electricity. They pay electricity, then they must also go and buy. Then the auntie doesn't have any food. Then the farm was given to that household to go and manage the farm. But the auntie must go pay when she buys vegetables. It doesn't help the auntie at all. So we need the government house. And the government house feeds the community. There's a government house in every region, in every community, with vegetation, with everything that ShopRite and Checkers brings to the house. And that the people then goes, and the people then receives their parcels from that house of what there is available during that season. And that is what we need when we work on the poverty state of South Africa and of Africa. We need our governments to work hand in hand with our shops. And when it comes to unemployment in the communities, we gotta discuss that now, because we also have an approach that we want our governments to work on next year when it comes to making sure that the organizations at least make sure that they employ people from a certain age at a certain, without the people, organizations cannot tell the people that you had to work last year in order to get a job, that you had to work last month in order to get a job with the organization. No, they're sending someone out of the door. You need to allow the people, even if their CV says that they have not worked last month, you employ that person even if they have worked last year, because we want to overcome poverty. And that is why the organizations receive the government funding every month. They don't receive it to chase the boys away from the office, from the doors. No, they receive the government funding so that they can employ these boys that went to primary school only, that didn't get a school education, that was not educated in school, that did not work last year because they didn't have an identity document, because Home Affairs is giving them problems. You employ those boys without identity documents. Africa, South Africa, you have those boys. You want to fix your house, you fix it right. You don't tell the boys that they don't have a document and then they must now go and do gangsterism on the streets. No, that's not how you help those boys. You make sure that your manufacturing organizations every month submits a form to the workplace, whoever, right, the workplace authority that ensures that everyone is employed. Yes, you start all of these functions in the country. You get a workplace authority that governs the workplaces when it comes to the unemployment rate. They governs the workplaces, and when they governs the workplaces, these workplaces needs to submit on a monthly basis a submission record of how many people are new in your country, how many people are new in your organization, how many people has been dismissed. They are already doing that, but they are not doing it right. Rabia knows, because I've been working in human resources in South Africa, and I know that we can do anything and say anything. But what we can do is you submit those records. You say there's so many unemployment people, and there's so many people that left the office this month. And then what does the government, the workplace, whatever group of people do, the workplace authority do, they ensure that when so many people was dismissed, you need to employ so many people. And when we receive that record again, we want to see that so many people has been employed. That is how strict they has to get about poverty. They have to be strict about it. They have to be strict with workplaces, that you do not submit those records only to come and reveal to me once a year what you have done. No, because everyday poverty is an issue. And every day we need to deal with poverty in a responsive way. AWOKH is always about responsiveness, so that no one gets angry ears, because the angry ears gets up and it grows and it grows, and Rabia's teeth grows when it gets angry, because it's angry challenges in life, and it pressurizes the human body, and it pressurizes the brain, and then the whole body is out of function. And that doesn't only happen with Rabia, but it happens with everyone. When anger steps in, then the whole environment changes, then the whole appearance changes, and then people get what they call angrinesses. And then when angrinesses is in the room, governments needs to know how to deal with the angrinesses, so that we don't find ourselves breaking one another, and so that we don't find ourselves having to go back to apartheid years when we already overcame all the apartheid years in our generation. And that is just the basicness of our leaders' approach, recapping the challenges, our new leaders' approach, what they can do in our offices. And you can call me. Yes, I always say contact Rabia. I will sit one-on-one and I will educate you right and straight to this that you can implement in your country. You need to contact me, leaders. I know everyone is watching AWOKH's videos, and I know everyone is constantly tuned in. But if you don't allow people to educate you right through this process, then you're gonna be all over the place with it. Rabia knows what she's talking about. Rabia knows why she's educating in this way. But Rabia requires you that when you get to learn that there's people in your country that can do certain things, then you don't disregard them because of what you want to have them be, right? And because of how you want to have them be at. But you allow these people into the offices so that they can walk you through the season. And that is what AWOKH would be starting up next year. AWOKH would educate government leaders through seasons of challenges. Because I've been there, I've been educated, I went through the office workplace, and I went through that education season. And that is us overcoming, and the pace of how we overcome those challenges. So remember, there's a lot that we can say and do, but the pace of how we're doing it is, are we arrogant about it? Are we ignorant about the poverty? Are we angry still? Are we still in that apartheid mindset? Are we now doing apartheid all over again? It is that pace that we are on that either says that our parliamentary leaders are either working with us, or they are either against us. It is that we need to figure out that it is not where we find ourselves in season, but it is how do we approach the season in general. It is not the challenges that we went through, but it is how do we stand and how do we respond in a better way the next day with the challenges that we have gone through. It is that we don't go and overdo what we went through, but we try and always be the fine person in the room, the better person in the room, the person with a better reaction in the room. That is basically what we were on about for today. And we're gonna also continue on. Yes, so there's lots of things. I don't want to spoon feed, right? But I educate in a way that when people really notices that you can really be an assistance to them, then you require them not to disregard that, right? So you don't spoon feed them, but you also don't let them disregard what they really can see, that where you really find yourself at in life. And that is where we want to focus on also, is that sometimes we are arrogant in our education, right? Yes, people have been angry with me because I said that in last month's discussion. I said that the educated group are more advantaged in our generation, are in a more advantaged space in our generation than the non-educated group. And I want to focus on that just now. I'm just going to have a sip of tea quickly. I want to focus on that now because our generation has gone through a lot, right? But what our generation went through, the education, I've mentioned that I have a discussion every Monday on my page. I'm going to have a discussion now on Instagram that is called when the project became personal, right? Yes, I talk a lot, so I'm going to take a break because that starts at 12 o'clock today. Yes, when the project becomes personal is every Monday's discussion, and every Tuesday I'm talking about parenting for this month. And we're gonna continue on our ways of discussing these issues because we want to talk about everything, and we've got the energy. We are at home, we've got the strength to do that. So we're talking to our Instagram people, yes, because we have done what we can on our Facebook page, and we're still doing what we can to assist where we can. So we are now busy on our Instagram page with when a project became personal. With saying that, we focused with last Monday's discussion on Instagram with saying that the educative group in our generation and the non-educative group in our generation. The educative group, that is the person that earns the 50,000 rand, that can now go and buy a house, go and buy a car, and they earn the 50,000 rand. And then there's the non-educative group that doesn't have a roof over their heads, that doesn't have a house to stay in, that doesn't have food on the table. And the educative group, when they're done finishing and when they're done buying all of their groceries, they buy 2 or 3 trolleys. Yes, I've mentioned it just now, but then they still have a 5,000 rand left right in their bank account. And that is a waste of leadership, that the arrogance concerning our generation, when a project that became a project, right? So when you become a parliamentary leader, then it becomes a project to some people. And the project is some people in a group, in a community of people, where they decide to abuse a certain group of people in the generation, right? And that to them then becomes a project. And then they make the project personal. And then in our countries these years, the project now is the education department became part of the project. Some of our workplaces becomes part of the project. How they employ people becomes part of the project. So it's a whole arrogant group of people that leads our countries, right? And that leads our generation. But they lead our generation in such a way that they look at this house and they say, those people can be in poverty. Those people can die out. We don't care about those people. And then they give the 50,000 rand to the other household, right? So that is the project that we are discussing about on Mondays, right? It is that agreement that I don't know if they signed an agreement with someone or if there's a world leader that leads the world in this way, but our people stepped away from our parliamentary leaders only because of that, right? Our people stepped away from respecting our parliamentary leaders only because the project became personal and the people on the ground floor then became vulnerable to being abused by our leaders, that the one house earns 50,000 rand and the next house doesn't have food on the table in the same country, sometimes in the same communities, sometimes in the same regions, by the same presidential leaders, and only because of that, the personal effect, thank you, Sasa, the personal effect that has on our generation and on our country's mental state and on the gangsterism in the country is where people had to stand against presidential leaders in season, and they had to say that if your presidential assignment is a project that you came into the office because you are angry with my people in the country, so you become a presidential leader because you are angry, and now you want to work according to that project, then humanity says only then humanity steps away from the presidential leaders, and we go on with making sure that we protect ourselves in our season, that we chase our presidential leaders off the seats, because if we became a personal project to them, if they have decided to come and abuse us in the offices, if they have decided to come and work on a project to kill half of mankind and to make sure that other half of mankind is fine, then the human right of our everyday people and the ground floor allows us to step away from our presidential leaders in season and to say that every presidential leader who have become part of their discussion that has now made humanity a target for them, that has now made nations a target for them, that has now made nations on a list of people that this household needs to go there and this household needs to be treated in that way, this household needs to go there and this household food needs to go there. If humanity and if our country has become part of that project, then we require our presidential leaders to step down, because we are not going to allow our people to become targets of presidential leaders in our countries, because these are the discussions that we sense in our veins that went on around those meetings, right? And these are the things that are happening in our season. And these are the things that we as human beings are addressing in our season. That the only reason we are requiring some leaders to step down is because they became to make humanity a target for them. Presidential leaders needs to come. The presidential leaders needs to come to the seat and needs to be honest about what is the project that they are working on when it comes to the human protectiveness of everyone in the country, of everyone in this world. What is the protective plan that they are working on? Are they against humanity or are they for us? Are they working on a project or are they not working on a project? Are they busy with a team of people that are killing out people, that are starting wars and abuses in countries? Because remember, when you manage a country in such an ignorant way, where half of the country has food and the other half of the country has 50,000 rand, then you are part of a project, then you are working on a certain project. And that project, we are dealing with those presidential leaders in season that has worked on that project, because our generation has decided that we are not going to go through those apartheid years and through those wars and through those arrogances and through those abuses that our parents went through. Only because of that, our generation has decided we give our name generation 100 years, right? Generation 2,000 years from today. The impact of those decisions that we are making today has an impact on our children and on our families 2,000 years for today. We do not only think about ourselves where we are at today. We do not only think about where we find ourselves at today, but we think of the difference that we make in season that would have that effect on our generation 2,000 years from today. And only because of that, we are earnestly and harshly speaking to our presidential leaders who are working on a project to kill people, who are working on a project to destroy humanity, who are working on a project to mentally challenge humanity, who are working on a project to mentally abuse humanity. And we are asking that group of parliamentary leaders to just step away from us, because humanity is not going to allow our children to look at us in this way and to see that our parents are being abused by presidential leaders, and then it looks like our parents does not even have control over the houses, right? Because remember, The way that our children perceives us is the way that our children goes and educates. Is that environment that we create today is an environment that would be sensed on this earth 2,000 years from today, is an environment that would be sensed, that would echo on this earth, is that difference that we can make today in this generation. That's why we do not only think about our own households, because people who pays one person 50,000 rand and another person doesn't have food is people who only think about their own households. And that's why we were not arrogant with the educative group, but we were saying on our page that the educative group are part of that project that these people seems to favor in season because they are the educated group, and the other group of human beings are being deprived of being part of mankind while they are part of mankind, while they have been born to be on earth, while creation allows and sustains them every day. It is like the gangsterism boy on the streets, right? No matter how many times the government works on projects to suit the gangsterism boy on the street, there's still gonna be another boy tomorrow. No matter how many times the government wants to kill the situation out, the government will have to be working with understanding what is the universe educating us concerning the gangsterism boy, rather than wanting to go and kill the boy. Understand what is the boy's issue. Why is the boy mentally challenged? Why does the boy find himself in gangsterism? Why is the boy so angry with humanity? So that in the next generation, when there's the same problem, when our generation has got the issue of gangsterism again, then humanity knows and understands how to deal with the situation, because they have allowed themselves to understand and to listen to the problem, to the challenge at hand, because it is not a challenge, but it's the strong requirement of us to respond in season. We so say that our challenges is not our challenges, but it is our requirement to respond in a stronger mindset, in a stronger attitude, in a protective response with whatever it is that we do in our seasons. That is part of where we want to be at when it comes to that. Then we not even have spoken about the salaries of our generation. We had not the salaries. We wanted to speak about the office hours that are also mentally. So we bring AWOKH people of color. We're going to do this, and we can do this in the completeness of what we wanted to say for this whole session, right? And one of the things that we want to do when we want to talk about why our generation is so mentally challenged is the office hours, right? 40 hours a week is 40 hours a week. But what Rabia educates in season and people of color, what I've spoken about and what I've prepared also, that we want to have our leaders focus on next year, it is those 40 hours, 5 days a week. Remember, these are parents that works in those office hours. These are mamas and papas that works in those offices 5 days a week. And from the 5 days of the week, they work 40 hours, right? On a Saturday and on a Sunday is the only 2 days out of the 7 days that they are at home with the children and with the family. What does Rabia say can we do in our season? Those 5 days can even become 4 days in the office, right? Those 40 hours can even include 4 days at the office. That's a requirement. Why? Because Rabia has got one education that Rabia thinks that our tech system and our people who works with the techs in our countries needs to get right. What is that? That is our unpaid hours during the office hours. That is hours at work, right? Rabia is arguing the case when it comes to the amount of hours work that has got our people so mentally challenged, right? And my case in season when it comes to that human protective right, when it comes to mental wellness that has got to do with the office hours, that has got to do with the familynesses, that has got to do with that is mankind itself, right? Everyone needs to work, everyone needs to have food on the table, everyone needs to, yes, we talk with everything and you listen with everything. Everyone needs to work, everyone needs to have food on the table, everyone needs to pay a house, everyone needs to pay a car. But with everyone that needs to pay a car and a house, what is it that we need to do? Because mentally they're already worrying. Every month they worry because now I must pay the car, now I must pay this, now I must pay this. They're already mentally challenged when they start on a Monday. And then the Monday already starts because if the boss treats me wrong today, and I must still pay the house, and I must still pay the car, and I must still pay this, and I must still pay that, then the people sit in the office and they paranoid the whole day. Then the Friday when they get home, they are tired, they are arrogant, they are ignorant, they don't want to look at anyone. When you look at them in the shops, they are angry with you because they are overtired, they are overworked, they are exhausted, they don't know what to do because their human rights, there's no protective environment concerning the office hours. What is manipulation? Manipulation is when you give an employee in the office an unpaid lunch hour or an unpaid tea hour while during the 40 hours work at the office during your hours from 8 until your hours till 5:30 in the afternoon, right? So your hours from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5:30 in the afternoon, however you work it out, can never have an unpaid lunch break in. Why? Because it is hours worked in the office. Whenever you leave the office for more than an hour, then it can have an unpaid in that day, right? If you go to home for more than an hour, then you can say that now is an unpaid during your 40 hours. During your 40 hours, you have one unpaid because you went over an hour's lunch and tea break, right? Anything included in your hours work at the office are hours accounted for. Why does Rabia say so? Because it is hours that you have spent on your work premises. Why is it hours accounted for? Because it is hours spent in the work office. It can never be an unpaid lunch break, 30 minutes. It can never be a 15-minute unpaid tea break. No matter how they calculate it, it is not mentally right. It is manipulation of the human brain. It is manipulation of mankind, because mentally it challenges you. If you know that I've worked 40 hours, and how many people have argued this with officers? How many people got their pay slips during the day? And when they got their pay slips, they said, this doesn't seem right with me because I've been at the office. How can you call it an unpaid? Because it is accounted hours that I've spent at my office. It can never be calculated as an unpaid. However mathematical system did that, it is mentally wrong for the human brain to understand and accept the mental effect that had during your day, because you've completed your 40 hours and your lunch during that cannot be named an unpaid. It is a paid lunch. It's calculated, and the 40 hours is even calculated in that. 4 days a week, you calculate the 4 days. 3 days people gets off they get off a Friday, a Saturday, and a Sunday. They start work on a Monday, and they can have the 4 days work. And the 4 days work is that the 3 days they have family time. The 4 days is not gonna mentally challenge them, because they at least have a whole day to recap from the challenges that happen in the offices, from thinking that my boss is going to be angry because I still need to do this, but I also need to pay my house and my car. So now I'm going to have to be fine with the boss when he's angry, and he's going to have to treat me the way he wants to because he's going to be angry, because he even knows that I have to pay my house and my car, and he's even arrogant about that, and he's even rude about that, and he's even angry about that, and he's even jealous about that. And then I still have to sit mentally and go home on a Saturday, and then when my children look at me, then I'm so overtired because I even are thinking about what the boss gonna do on Monday, because I must still pay the house and the car. All of these mental challenges has an effect on our people, and we need to make sure that we don't abuse our people. Humanity is not a project for you. You do not abuse us. Whoever you are, you do not abuse us, because we are not dumb about this. Those 40 hours work, you calculated. Those lunch breaks can never have a terminology. Yes, the lunch break or the tea break during your day's work while you were at your workplace can never have a terminology in mathematical system that calls it an unpaid. No. Why? Because it's hours spent in the office. Why? Because then it's manipulation. If you went home 1 hour long away from the office, then it can be an unpaid. Why? Because you drove away from your office, you left the premises for more than an hour, and only then it is called an unpaid. Because it's unaccounted for. Because why? You left the work premises. Remember when we do our analysis every year? Remember when we do our statistics every year? Remember when you go and knocks on the auntie's door and say, Auntie, how many people is living at your house? Auntie, how many people are employed? Auntie, how many people is not employed? Then the auntie says, no, my husband is at the office. Then when you get to the office manager says, Auntie, are your uncle at you at work today? Because your wife said you are at work today. accounted hours for. And therefore, the terminology, when it comes to the terminology and our systems, our employers needs to implement that the uncle was at the office, the uncle was not at home during his lunch break, so it can never be an unpaid because it's an accounted on the premises where you spend the day at. Why? So that when tsunamis and earthquakes strikes, then the uncle was not unpaid at home, the uncle was at the office. The uncle was not at home, the uncle was at the office. That unpaid terminology needs to get out of the equation because it was never unaccounted hours. The uncle spent his day at the premises. He was at the office. He did not leave the office environment. So that analytically, when we look at the unemployment rate in our country, we understand the hours that our people work mentally. When we have to every 3 years go over how we can mentally make it work in the office environment for our people, then we understand our people has worked so many office hours for these 3 years, none unpaid, because the unpaid they don't account for. It must even be accounted. That's why you cannot have the terminology unpaid while it is accounted for hours. Because when we work on the mental challenges of our people, and when we want to work through the mental state of what our people went through, then we want our people to get then we want the terminologies to be right. So that mentally, when we look at the office hours and when we need to change our work hours according to our generation's different ways of eating, our generation, different changes that happen in the universe, now we need to update that requirement, and then their generation would be able to understand that our generation did not manipulate themselves, they did not manipulate one another, but they understand where it is that they find themselves in season. And that's why we say everyone can read and write. No one is dumb. So never calls that unpaid that you call on the pay slips and unpaid. It is accounted for hours. It is hours that you spend in the office, because 3 years from that, when we have to work out the mental state of our generation, how do we have to work out our office hours? Then when we count our hours worked, our generation in general, then we understand the challenges that our generation has got. Then we can deal with poverty in a different way. Then we can deal with all of it in a different way. Because remember, we were only educated in this way so that we can walk our road ourselves. It's like a baby that's been educated, and now the baby needs to walk on its own. The baby learns to walk on its own, and then the baby needs to understand that when they are challenged again, then they would understand the requirement of why they cannot manipulate these systems, because these systems are not only a system on a computer, but the human brain also reasons like that. The human brain also senses that there's not right. There's division somewhere. The human brain does mathematics and everything, and it challenges the human brain that humanity says that it's unpaid, but humanity did not leave the premises. Humanity calls it an unpaid, but it is hours accounted for. It is hours accounted for. It is hours accounted for. Your 9 to 5, in between that, your 13 minutes is paid, your 15 minutes is paid, and your other 15 minutes is paid. That is 1 hour. Anything more than that then becomes an unpaid. Then becomes an unpaid on your pay slip. Then your pay slip can mention it as an unpaid because it is unaccounted for. Even if it's unaccounted for, but you have taken more than that, then you can call that plus a lunch break plus 15 minutes. You call it a plus 15 minutes. You don't call it unaccounted for hours, because according to the human brain and according to the computer, when the computer works out mathematically this method, then the computer says, but you spent 40 hours at your desk, but your manager says that you were unpaid on that day, and your manager calls it unpaid, but that you were then in the office. And then the brain thinks different, because then the brain works with the people at the houses, how many people statistically were unemployed. And then when the whole function of the computer works it out, then the computer says, but humanity is doing something wrong, because humanity calls it unpaid, but it's accounted for hours because no one left the office, everyone was at the office, so only therefore you call it a 15 plus this, a 15 plus this. You have your lunch break 15 minutes, lunch break 15 minutes tea, and another 15-minute tea. That's 1 hour a day, right? That's in your 40 hours. It's accounted for because you, according to the mental wellness of the human body and how the human body should be sustained, it's accounted for because your requirement to take a break from the morning 8 until the afternoon 5:30, 1 hour is more than enough. 30 minutes, 15 and 15, anything more than that is plus that. Plus that plus that. Then you can then unpaid that. When you work the terminology out, you had your 1 hour lunch break, and anything more than the lunch hour, you say plus 15 minutes. And when you calculate at the end of the week, your calculation would say minus the 15 minutes. You plus it there and you minus it there. You plus it there and you minus it there. Why? Because you plus 1 hour tea break, 1 hour, 30 minutes lunch, 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon, plus another 15 minutes longer because maybe you went something. You minus that is unaccounted for hours. Why? Because that is not accounted in your 40 hours. That's a requirement legislatively, office requirement of your agreement, your employment agreement. That is what we have to be focusing on, because that plays part of the mental challenges, because the human brain reasons very differently. And the human brain is not only a brain, but it's almost like a computer. And my human brain argues with me a lot. It argues a lot about all of these things. And that's how my human terminology explains it to me. And so I'm going to explain it again. 40 hours worked. Everything between the 40 hours, your 30 minutes is accounted for hours, your 15 minutes in the morning and your 15 minutes in the afternoon. You see, it's written in my hand. The 15 minutes in the morning is accounted for, the 15 minutes is accounted for, and the 30 minutes lunch is accounted for, right? Thank you, God. God educates us like that. Yes, He even wrote it on our hand. Yes, you see these lines there. He means 15 minutes here accounted for, 15 minutes in this line in your hand accounted for, and this 30 minutes lunch break is accounted for, and that's why it cannot be called an unpaid, because it was spent in the office environment. It was spent in the office environment. Anything that you take in between there is going to be a plus. You plus it on your pay slip, but you minus it when you calculate it. Why do you plus it? You don't plus it by plussing it on your hours. No, you say you took 13 minutes plus 15 extra minutes. And at the end of the day, when you calculate it, you calculate your hours worked, because there's an extra 15 minutes that you took more than the hour. Then you divide it at the end of the week. Then you extract that, right? You extract that by that 15 minutes. You plus it here, you say 40 hours, 7 hours or 8 hours a day. All those 8 hours are counted for, so it's nowhere on the payslip gonna say unpaid, because it's accounted for 8 hours. Any 15 minutes more than that, you say plus 15, you took an extra plus, you took an extra, you plus that extra, and then you say now you extract that extra that you have plus there, and your 40 hours stays your 40 hours. That is basically it. I'm all over the place, but it is very exciting. Mathematics is very exciting, but you're gonna have to always get it right to address issues in this world that we want to address with. So yes, all over the place, Rabia, always all over the place. Always all over the place, always all over the place, but never disregard the education that we give you, because even all over the place, Rabia even gives you education that is required. That is not the perfect education, no, because sometimes we talk and the spit goes a bit there, and then we continue to talk, but such is life. How is life? Life is, India is in poverty. Rabia, would you go to India if it's in poverty and the flies all over the place? Yes. Africa is in poverty. Rabia, you talk on your page and the spit goes a bit there. Yes, I will go to Rabia's page. Why? Because Africa is in poverty and Africa is full of flies. And when I fly to Africa, then I'm gonna be a fly myself, because I'm even gonna be fine on that day. That is humanity. That is how we're gonna have to accept uniquenesses, and gonna have to accept the stunningness, the ugliness, the differentness, the that. Remember how you said when you used to talk and you sit in the office and people maybe, and there was someone maybe sitting and then the boogie was by their nose, and then someone says to the other one, oh, the book is by your nose, and then everyone says, oh, the book is by your nose, and then the other one gets so shy and they don't know what to do. But such is life. We've got flies, we've got famine, we've got poverty, we've got all of the issues, we've got talking, and then the spit goes a bit, and then people needs to sit and they need to accept that this is mankind. Mankind looks all these colors, and mankind needs to say that on the day that I need to go to Africa, that I'm not going to be scared because of the flies. No, because I make my hair like a fly on that day. That is where we are at in this season. We get dressed with that and we be fine with that, even in our challenge seasons. Yes, so that is all that we had to say for today. It is be there, do it with the completeness that you can, and don't let anyone make you paranoid because of the fly that's in Africa. No, because we grew up where we had to go to the auntie's house and we had to go to the mama's house, and when mama used to bring the emmer, and then the emmer used to somehow stand by the room, and then everyone takes a wee wee in the emmer, and then we somehow eat our food. The lounge is somehow just there, and we eat our food, and everyone is fine, and no one is sick, and everyone is well, and Africa is well, and the people have houses, and the people live a long life. Only when people come and get angry, and then they sabotage us with illnesses and things, but that is on them, that's not on us. According to this universe, it sustains us with all the ugliness, all the flyness, all the stunningness, all the cuteness, all the diseases, the wellness, and everything. The universe can do all that. It can sustain us even through anything. That is what we wanted to talk about today. That is people of color for this month. It's full on, it's all over the place, it's here, it's there, it's flies, it's that, it's food on the table, it's 50,000 rand in the bank account and no one has food. It's getting that parliamentary leader out of the office and make sure that that 50,000 rand gets calculated in a way that that household that doesn't have food gets a 10,000 rand of that 50,000 rand. Work all the salaries out of all the government people, work all of those 50,000 rands out, and take some of those 50,000 rand, take 20,000 rand of that away and gives it to other households. Work it out, people. Get it right. Do the calculation right. Do the mathematics right. Next year, January, we're going to be on point with this. We have done this. The completeness of all the colors. We don't overlook the poverty in our countries. We don't overlook the situations and tell ourselves that now I'm staying in New Zealand and there's no flies in my house. No, there's a fly every time because there's trees everywhere. Then they fly by and then I talk and then they fly by the screen and then I have a good laugh. But such is life. Why? Because never tell yourself that you are disgusted by the stunning creation of life itself, because even that stunning creation can talk, it can hear, it has got eyes, it is very stunning, it can sustain you, it can make you stunning, and then the birds in the sky even comes and they talk to Rubia, and then we even have colorful discussions with them because they are all the stunningness in the universe, and we even appreciate everyone who's got a dog in the house. Yay! Why? Why? Because the dog has been perceived as the most disgusting animal on this earth. And people in South Africa, when they look at the dog, they say, sis, go from the door. Sis, they buy a dog and they put the dog. I was like that, right? They buy a dog and they put the dog by the house and then they say, sis, go from the door. Go away from the door, dog. Go away from the door the whole time. And then they go and buy another dog and then they chase the dog away. And then creation says, but even then people learn to appreciate because they even accept what creation has blessed us with in our generation. All the stunningses, all the glorinesses, all the uglinesses, all the colors. It's pink, it's red, it's blue, it's green, it's white. And we can even still look after everyone and make sure that everyone is in our houses and that everyone is fine. And then we want to say that, yes, we can do that. Poverty, other countries, Muslim countries, yes, we salute y'all. Everyone says yesterday they are still working at Myanmar. We don't really understand the situation that's happening in Myanmar, but all we know it is a war and an unfair situation. But we know that with unfairness, fairness is always in the room, and only therefore we require every country that deals with that situation to deal with it with a protective mindset, that they understand the protectiveness required for the people in Myanmar, and that those government leaders what needs to understand the differences, that what the situation is that they are arguing about, that they overcome even that, and that they would be able to, like Russia and Ukraine today, Putin gets angry on one day and on the next day Putin doesn't kill any people. Why? Because Putin learns to listen to the agreement on table. So what did we require of people who find themselves in war is we required our war leaders to always make time to sit around the table. Why? Because when we are on the cell phones and we argue, then you don't see the next person on the cell phone, and then there's lots of division, right? There's lots of things that can educate you wrong from that person. But when you allow yourself to sit in one room with a person, and even if they're not in one room but in agreement, right? and they can sit around the table and they can work through the differences, then they would be able to understand and to listen to one another differently. Then they would understand the reason for arguing about the story. And then when we listen to one another and when there's agreement, that's why when we're in war, you continuously make time for agreement meetings, for meetings to discuss the war issues. You continuously make time to talk to one another so that you'll listen to what is it that you want. Maybe there was a loud noise and no one listened and everyone was misperceived with where they are at. But when we make regular meetings concerning the issues at hand, then we have an opportunity to get that oneness in understanding, right? That oneness that doesn't bring division or that doesn't bring confusion, but then we come to one-mindedness. And that's what we require with issues like the wars in this world, is we continuously make time to listen to what is this person's requirement, what is this person's requirement. We bring them together to understand what is it that they want concerning this person's got an opinion, this person's got an opinion, but what can we do as outsiders that now looks upon all of these issues and that now understands that these issues can sometimes get out of control, but the only way that these people can learn to get in the oneness of what they are requiring, they would need to make time to listen, to speak over what they're requiring, and they would need to do that on a regular basis. That is how you deal with war. War is not only about that person wants that and that person is following that up. No, war is about making time to listen to the disagreements, because everyone is living and is reacting from a different part of the universe. But when the universe brings you together and you listen the one to the other, then this part of the universe would understand what this part of the universe is saying, and then that would give us a peace of mind. And that is where we want our war leaders to continuously come together, to continuously discuss their disagreements, so that they overcome that they do not maybe understand that the universe tells them to do, and the other one says, but the universe doesn't tell me that to do. And the other one says, yes, but you living in this way. And the other one says, yes, but I want to do this. And then the universe requires us also always to make time so that we listen, so that we can come in agreement with what we require in our season. That is how we approach and how we deal with the issues at hand. It is those agreements, and when we talk about those agreements, we do not allow ourselves to get paranoid by the situation, but we allow ourselves, with the calmness of what is happening, to come into listening mindset of listening to what is the requirement of the one, the other. And that requirement, that listening has got a protective environment, right? Listening is kindness, right? And kindness is protectiveness. And that is where we are at with the seasons of our generation, with what our generation requires. The other thing that we conclude with today is the response of the United Nations. Yes, we are concluding with that, and we are even already feeling fluid because we have said a lot. Pardon us for that. But what we are saying is, we are all like that. We are all like that. They say, Rubia, we can never have you on television. You gotta do all of those things. I say it doesn't matter, because Africa is all of that. And I'm from Africa, and it's all of that. And I miss nature, I miss universe. This universe is stunning, ugly, and this day cute, and this day, the next day that happens, and the next day that happens, and it's all over the place. And such is life itself, and we accept it in its completeness, right? And so our response to the United Nations, people of color response with that team. They've got a lot to do. First thing that we do not know is the United Nations have got a lot of things. They've got a lot of representatives, but the representatives they can do all of these things, but they are in that mindset where the educated group of people are excluded from the uneducated group of people. So our United Nations meetings are all based on the educated United Nations team and the poverty team. And when they respond with that mindset of sometimes looking down on other people. Sometimes there's people in the United Nations that maybe a BIK that can maybe say, but you know what? I love a fly and I love to travel to the fly countries. And then that is your people that you work with in season, that has got that mindset, that has got that attitude, that has got that they say that I'm not in the United Nations to sit in the office all day. No, you are part of the United Nations response team, that when you look at the world in general, And when you get to understand the challenges in a country, you don't only travel there when there's a challenge. No, every country has got a United Nations response team. And the United Nations response team responds to global assistance required, because this is our country. You respond even before you respond, even before you are required to respond. That team does not sit in the offices waiting on a tsunami to strike their country. No, they make sure that they go into their communities, they go and study their communities, they go and take photos regularly. Yes, Al Jazeera is teaching them that regularly. You go regularly to those countries and communities. You go and take photos of the situations, so that when issues strike, then the United Nations team are familiar with this is how this country is looking. This is the requirement. This is what the United Nations can do to help them. And only because of that, you do that 3 times a year. You do that more than 3 times a year. Why? Once a month you can do even that. The UN group can go into the communities once a month. They share photos into the UN offices. The UN offices of all these different countries, the office leaders, they sit, they go through all those videos, so that when there's things that happens in these countries, they already know how to help these countries, because they already know that the UN can do this to help, the UN can do that to help, the UN can do that to help, and they already know the situation. And that is what we call a responsive approach when it comes to the poverty issues, when it comes to the challenges in this world. That is where we want our United Nations teams to be at. They need to be in a responsive mindset. AWOKH says, let them be in a responsive mindset. Is respond before responding, respond before responding, respond before responding. You are representative. Every country has got a UN representative. Respond before responding. The UN does this, the UN can do this and this and this and this and that. There's a situation in that country. I'm the UN representative in this country, and I'm the UN representative in the UN office. This one and that one communicates. This one sends the photos to that one. This is our situation. So if anything happens in this country, then this one knows what the UN can do to help. This one does the same. This country does the same. This country does the same. This country does. All the countries in the world, the United Nations governing body, whatever they do, that is the response of a responsive attitude in our season. Have that attitude with everything that we do, and our country can never, and our nations can never go wrong with the challenges that they had in 2020. That is what we had to say. And now for this Monday, next Tuesday, we're celebrating our birthday. 22nd 11, and we are excited about it, and we are glad about it, and we are embracing the 39th year of my birthday. Yes, we appreciate the 39th year. Why? Because Rubia has never been a person who celebrates a birthday. No, I'm never a birthday celebrated person. But this year, why am I required to? Because of my year that I'm in, the 2020 year, 2020. Right? A generation of the 21st century, 21st era, an operation, a unique operation of our own, uniquely operating in our lives with what it is that we were born to do. 39 to me means, what did I achieve from when I was born until the 39th year? A lot. What have I learned? A lot. How have I implemented that the ways that I can? How have I educated and represented with what I can, with what I can do? I am 40 years old next year, so my 39 year means with all the years that I had, moving into the 40 year, different mindset. A mother, you are parenting, but the 40 makes you a bit older. Yes, it makes you into that more parenting attitude and parenting mindset of understanding what does parenting means to our generation. Where did parenting start for Rabia? At a very young age, people's eyes were tuned unto Rabia, and at a very young age, people used to follow Rabia in a journey in life. Now, Rabia is also a parent in her own household, but Rabia's 40 years reminds her of now not only parenting from 40 years, but of the 40-year motherly parenting that people's eyes would also be tuned in. Because remember, you had your youth years, now your 40 years is not parenting in your own house only, but it is that every individual's eye that now does not look at you and notice that you are a mother because you are a Rabia and you already have children. No, it is that mindset of the fact that you are a Bia Elise, you are now a mother also, your mama Anna factor, the different mama parenting in the community, what it is that you do, whether it's in your business, whether it is that you everyday do, whether it's in your office, whether it is with you, what you do when you go to work, people's mindsets and educative ways are going to change because they are even viewed in and that in your life. That is where we are at with our AWOKH business this season. We were focusing on the fashion of the season and speaking. We learn from our sister Antoinette and speaking with what we wear, right? With how we wear, but being fine with how it is that we present ourselves, right? Because that presentation is also very important in life. But with saying that, that acceptiveness of how you accept yourself is how you would accept other people. When you look at other people and they look differently, how you would accept them if you get in one room and people's reaction are different, right? They look at you, they would immediately respond, and how they respond sometimes to themselves. Sometimes they go into the mirror and they say, oh, this Rubiak is this and that today. And the other times they are very excited about themselves. But what AWOKH has learned from Antoinette them and from everyone in the teams, yes, Malvina, we have also learned from you in season, is that our representation is how does other people, what do they see when they look at us, right? And then I say sometimes people, Antoinette and Malvina, your nails are too long, take it off, and your hair weaves are too long, take it off. And then they get angry at me, and then I get angry at them also sometimes for some things that they did. But it was that when we look at one another, we do not exclude one another because of that, because there's lots of other challenges that goes on in life and with regards to woman itself. But it is that we accept and educate ourselves to be fine with ourselves, and we therefore go and represent, and we therefore that becomes our everyday reaction. Because yes, we are excited to be parents and to be parenting, not only parents of where we are at, but parenting in the community and people listening to us and people listening to what we are doing. Yes, life, we accept it, we appreciate that. Yes, we appreciate it. But what we are also excited about is that no matter when people look at us and they look at our dimples and our borders, then we accept those dimples and our borders. Yes. Why? Because so that when we look at other people and they look different, then we teach ourselves to be acceptive to other people, to not disregard them because they look in a funny way. No, because life does not want us to exclude anyone out of our doors. Life wants us to accept, and to accept other people is very challenging for us. And therefore next year we're gonna focus on our Mona Lisas, right? We're gonna focus on our Mona Lisa eyes, right? What is it concerning the Mona Lisa poster that spoke to Rabia Elise in season, right? What is it that Rabia Elise stands for when she goes into represents concerning women in general, and concerning our Mona Lisas in season as is our every appearance, our everything within ourselves, and how is it that we represent and that we advocate that Mona Lisa. When Mona Lisa took that photo, when we look at Mona Lisa's eyes today, Mona Lisa envisioned herself into a generation. It is the impact of where you are at in your season, of that you are being challenged with, of that you overcome in your season. How is it that people in generations to be would look in on your Mona Lisa, and how would they then accept themselves with what they learned from your Mona Lisa in season? That is where we are at with AWOKH next year with your Mona Lisa in season. Other than that, we appreciate all our Mona Lisas. Our Mona Lisas went through much challenges, and on the year of January we're going to discuss all of that even, and we are going to be excited to be working together again, because we were fighting, because this one wants a business and this one wants a black owned business, and my business must be a white owned, my business must be a people of color owned, and everyone wants their different business, right? It's interesting, but it's very funny. It's very funny. It's very funny. It's very funny, but it can get very challenging. Why? Because only it gets challenging when there's so much jealousy when it comes to all of what we're doing, right? The jealousy steps into the room. The jealousy brings distraction, and the jealousy causes a lot of other abuses, right? Why? Because our Mona Lisas is everything concerning us. And that means that there's men also tuned in on us. When Rabia's angry, then Rabia's boyfriend gets angry and he wants to go and strike the whole world, right? Because these guys believe that they are our boyfriends and they're not even in our houses. No! And what do? We be fine fine with ourselves, our husbands be fine with their reactions, so that our households are not even challenged with that. Because otherwise, those guys would just want to sabotage, because they are in love with Rabia and they own the whole world. And according to them, when they own the whole world, they want to own Rabia also in the room, right? What does Rabia do? Rabia doesn't put herself in danger. If you want to own me, I put my Mona Lisa Bader on for you and you accept me in that way. And then that husband says he's not in your house, but he looks in on your photo and he says, but I accept you even in that way. But he calls you his own girl and his own wife. And then he gets angry and jealous in times. So when a woman gets angry and that guy notices, hey, they're angry with my Rabia, then he gets angry also. And then he gets abusive also. And only because of that, woman, all of us, we have got guys that are tuned in on us, and yes, they are tuned in on us, and yes, they all want the best for us, but yes, they also get angry. So what we are having to do, we need to make sure that our Mona Lisa does not abuse other people. Mona Lisa was only on a portrait, very stunning, but the abusiveness, when the guy looks at Mona Lisa and he looks at another woman and he says, you must look like Mona Lisa tomorrow, and your hair must look like Mona Lisa's hair tomorrow, and that's when abuse starts in relationships and with men and women in general, right? And when those abuses starts, the abuses does not only affect your house, but the abuses affects everything around us. And then a woman starts to fight, they don't know what they're fighting about, and then it's all of these guys that now has a woman, right? And they want an AWOKH and they want to Rabia Elise, and tomorrow the guy says, you put your hair weave in, and I say, but I don't like the hair weave, and he says, but you are AWOKH also, you put the hair weave in, and that's also the jealousies and things that comes along with it, and the things of them having to learn to accept women the way women are. That is what we're going to discuss next year. The protective environment required when we look upon one another, then we're not jealous upon one another, because all of these guys believe that they own us, and we now have businesses and they work with our businesses, but they also get angry when we get angry with one another. And only therefore we're going to have to decide to overcome all of those jealousies. And yes, America was very angry with me, because these American guys has been writing about Rabia all these years, and they are angry because the guys has been tuned in on me, not because of anything, but the guys have also been working with the AWOKH business preparation that even came to my door only in 2018. But even before that, AWOKH was already in these guys' mindsets, and they already knew where they saw Rabia. Because of why? Because they ruled the world all these years, and they knew Rabia's journey all these years, and they believe that Rabia is their woman, no matter how their woman is, but they also want to educate us in that way. And when we get jealous of that, our jealousies interferes with lots of things that happens in our countries, in our communities, in our households, because all of these guys have got their own woman that they are tuned in, and they want to educate their own woman in a different way. And that is what we're going to focus on next year with our Mona Lisas, is to have that protective environment when it comes to what we do in our businesses also, so that it does not affect our countries, and so that it does not affect our households, and so that we are not challenged by one another. Because it's one thing for us to grow up with one another, but it's another thing for us where the guy claims you, where the guy says, yes, but you know that person, but I'm busy working with you, and I'm only there for requiring you to only focus on your business and on what you are doing in your season. And that is where we are at in season, and that is what we are doing, and that is what we continue to do. Continue to support AWOKH. Yes, you can fund AWOKH with AWOKH at outlook.com. We are waiting on those fundings. Buy our t-shirts, buy our caps. We will even send it to you in your international country. If you have got funds and you listen to our AWOKH, support our AWOKH business, our woken purpose mindset, our attitude, our reaction, our approach with our generation, moving with where we are at in that moving pace. Our generation understanding where to take a step back and where to move and how to move and the pace that we move in, the protective environment concerning us. And that is it that we want to say for today and for this year in totality. It's been probably 1 hour that we were speaking, but that is the completeness of it. Continue to listen to our videos, continue to listen to the educations, continue to make it your own. I give you the right to make it your own. Tomorrow I argue when you go and steal and you don't pay me for it, right? Because what you guys are doing, you guys are making work and you guys are earning an income for it, but you guys are not supporting my business, but you are working from my business. And that sometimes challenges us, because you go and discuss everything that I have said, but you do not support my business. And that becomes arrogant, And that is an arrogant way. If you want to support my business, you go and you fund my business, you email me, you make work to fund me. And that is all I want to say for today. Before I get more angry and more disgusting and more all over the place, let's do it in that way. Rather than arguing with one another, let's support one another with what it is that we do. And that is it. Have a study year further. We gotta studyingly come through next week with our birthday outfit and with what it is that we gotta do at our birthday. And we gotta celebrate our birthday, yes, on Saturday afternoon, and on Tuesday we just gotta do something small, right? Just the table set up. But on Saturday we really want to celebrate our birthday for the 22nd of November. On Tuesday we gotta celebrate it in-house, because on Tuesday is more familyness, and our birthday is more about familyness and about the nurturing factor, the birth factor of Rabia Elise, and we gotta appreciate that on Tuesday in-house. And that is where we are at in this season. Appreciativeness with the atmosphere in our house also, and with the house itself also. And that is it. Have a studying week further.